Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm your host Ade Darame, and across the room from me I have friend and colleague Mr. Mboj. Mr. Mboj, it's boring but it's the usual. Welcome to the program.
Absolutely. At least boring means regular.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you for always being here. And here we have, doing the signing, we have Lamindi Sonko. And for anybody watching this show for the first time, there's a reason it's called The Week in Review. We review 10 big stories or 10 stories that we think are big stories from the week just gone by. And just to give you some perspective, we did about 45 stories in the week. We can't bring all of them, can we? No, we can't. So what have we got? Well, we've got His Excellency the President and his speech at the UN General Assembly in New York. We've got the National Electric and Water and Electricity Company, NAWEC, asking people to conserve water, yes, even as we're getting flooded by rainfall. And also International Day of the Soninke Language, the first ever, was commemorated this week. And the Tourism Minister and other ministers faced the National Assembly to answer certain questions about their ministry. We'll delve into that. Gambia Police Force, they have gotten their first ever forensic lab. And also, really a breakthrough moment, textbooks written by Gambian authors are now going to be used in our schools here in the Gambia for the first time. And again, we go abroad, 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. That was celebrated and commemorated. And also linked to China, we have the TIVET, Crab Island TIVET Foundation. They've signed an MOU with an organization in China. And that's a very interesting one. And then finally, in terms of what some of the stories, Guinea-Bissau, our near neighbor, they just commemorated 50 years of independence. So these are some of the stories to look forward to. Mr. Mboj, yes. Let's get cracking. New York, His Excellency President Barrow was there to make a statement, an interesting statement at the UN General Assembly. Here's a snippet.
President Barrow added that the Gambia will continue advocating preventive approaches to peace building to avoid future conflicts. He further stated that the conflicts in Palestine, Sudan, the Sahel, Ukraine and Russia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Libya and other conflict zones demand the international community's immediate intervention.
Mr. Mboj, that snippet was him talking about international matters, but he also touched on the domestic. He touched on migration, something which affects this region particularly. And of course, he mentioned about how strong the democracy is here in the Gambia. We'll come to that later. But what was your takeaway from the speech, from the President's speech?
I felt that it was chastely delivered. He touched on the issues that you would expect our president to touch on, given our context, given our priorities. And yes, the collective action, collaboration, cooperation, stuff like that, technology transfer, and all the rest of it.
Narrowing the digital divide.
Exactly, narrowing the digital divide. Yep. You would expect him to make to say all of that. And of course he said, he was proud to say that we came third in Article 19's Global Expression Report 2024 and the like.
Yes.
Absolutely. What do you expect our president to say? We've always been really the sort of voice that would emphasize more of collaboration and cooperation, given our size and given our modest means, as it were. So for us, this is how we're going to speak. And of course, the One China policy, we have to repeat that. It's like a mantra.
Yeah.
And the US embargo on Cuba.
Yeah, it's quite.
So quite interesting. But afterwards, I was trying to sort of get from that, to extrapolate from that, any sort of coherent, if you like.
Because the thing has come up before that we don't have a foreign policy. This has been brought up many times before, and I remember our colleague Choi, when he was here, did a story about us not having a kind of formal foreign policy, and that was certainly something that came to mind when I was listening to the speech, yes.
Yes, because when he said that we are really in favor of the One China policy, I'm like, okay. And then we are sort of, with Cuba, the US should relieve, break it, stop the embargo on Cuba. Then I thought, okay, now is there a principal tissue connecting these two.
Go on.
On the one hand, it seems, because with Cuba, we are for the underdog.
You're
too big, you cannot do this.
Well, this is it.
But on the other hand, with the China, with the one China policy, it's really about Taiwan.
Taiwan is the underdog
Taiwan
in this case, really.
Then I thought, but this one, we are with the top dog, not the underdog.
Quite,
so
exactly.
quite interesting. But again,
Sure.
I cannot expect a certain this kind of consistency. Where does it exist? Consistency or internal coherence,
Well,
I feel like, of our foreign policy.
Yes,
so we have to be pragmatic.
Listen, you're a mind reader, because I was going to say, I think pragmatism is what comes through in when you listen to the speech. He's being pragmatic, kind of knows where the country's best interests lie. Certainly Cuba, they send doctors here. America, they contribute somewhat, but China more than any. And so, you know, we can just look around and we can see, and we've got a story later on dealing with the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic, and we know, you know, kind of the impact that China has had here in the Gambia. So you would expect that. You would expect that.
Oh, absolutely. And we've had a very long relationship with them. It was only during President Jammeh's period, and for his own political reasons,
he broke ties.
He broke ties with China and went with Taiwan. But afterwards, you know, all of that was reversed. So this is it. It was an okay. It was a good speech, really. Touch on what you needed to touch on. I sort of felt that because he's the chair of the OIC, perhaps the language and what's going on in Gaza would have been more trenchant. But he was sort of restrained. It wasn't quite like that. It was more conciliatory.
Very much so.
And measured tone, not going over the top, calling on all these international agencies to come together and try to bring a permanent peace.
And what was ironic about that was that in the list of speakers who came, I think there were 6 before him, or 7, the one before him was Palestine. And he spoke with real passion.
Absolutely, yes,
because it's an existential threat for them. You know, for them it's not just getting up there and making fancy speeches and kind of trying to please this person. Their very existence is at stake here, and so that came through it in his. But as you rightly say, for most of the people, even the ones who, and it was probably mentioned by almost every speaker, was that, you know, we need to resolve that particular conflict. We need to resolve the conflict in Russia, Ukraine, and so on. But very few of them spoke with the passion that I would have expected, including from our own president.
Absolutely, because you realize that the whole world, we're all divided, aren't we?
Yeah, quite.
Really, is there a more divisive sort of political issue in the world now than what's happening in the Palestinian issue? So anywhere you go, people are divided. Look at Africa.
Yeah, quite.
You know, the responses,
the
different camps.
When they wanted to sanction,
absolutely,
the number of countries that abstained and the ones who voted, you know, against sanctioning Israel. So yeah, but I think we might have to devote a whole program to just that particular war. But thank you for that, Mr. Bush. And now back home, literally back home, because some of us, our homes have been blighted by poor electricity and poor water supply. But NAWIC, they're not accepting all the blame. They're actually asking us to conserve water. Have a look and have a listen to this.
Water is as important as our lives. So people should not even wait for NAWIC to start telling them save water. And then we all know that when we save water, we are saving a lot of things. We are saving energy, we are saving money, and we are even saving the earth and the future generation to come. So basically, water conservation is as important as life conservation.
Water conservation as important as life conservation, Mr. Mboj. In July of this year, we had this SOE, the committee came out, State-Owned Enterprises Committee, and they said that because of the poor electricity performance and failing to hit their key targets, key performance indicating targets, 5% should be lopped off the NAWIC salaries, which caused quite some consternation. They went to the president, and in fact, when they made the kind of pitch to the president, the NAWIC board were right there in front. They made it in front of them. So I wondered whether, when I saw the press release about this water conservation, and they kind of throwing it back to the public and saying, you know, you have to do this, is it kind of saying, you know, it's not all our fault, you have a role to play as well?
Yes, absolutely. Even though afterwards, when our reporter asked him about, the incidents of their pipes, burst pipes, and then the response time, how long it takes for them to come and fix it, and then all the wastage, he said, yes, that is a problem.
It's a problem. Yeah.
So he accepted. Sure. For me, so I was just thinking that sort of, well, how much do we really waste that much water at home? And I keep thinking, because for most people, you don't have a regular water supply. You just have certain periods. Right. So when you get your pail, your barrels and all the rest of it, and fill them up. You're very careful how you use them. That's one aspect. And people who have to use them, the community taps, have to do all the effort it takes. When you bring the water, you'll tell everybody, be careful how you use it. So for us, I suspect that possibly there's some wastage. Nobody can deny that. But I think that for practical reasons, we tend to conserve water. When I go to houses, my impression, this is not by no means scientific, but my impression is that at home, I'm not sure whether we really waste that
and
much
one of the
water,
things that has,
given the circumstances.
And I can tell you this, one of the things that has surprised me as somebody who grew up in Sierra Leone, where, in this sub-region, Sierra Leone gets the highest rainfall and always has done. We've become used to harvesting rainwater. So you will see buckets outside of houses left overnight. You come in the morning, they're filled. I've never seen that here. And I would expect...
People used to do that. When I was younger, you'll get your pans.
People still do it in Sierra Leone.
Yes,
even because you never know in some places, for example, where the pressure to pump up the hills, we have all these hills that you don't have here. So people get used to that, kind of putting the buckets out there, and then the buckets are filled. And I expected now, in fact, had I been there, I would have asked that question, are you encouraging people to do this? Because it's something that you can't use it for drinking or what, but you can use it for all sorts of other things, that kind of water, because you'd need to purify it and get it fit for drinking. So it's not for drinking necessarily, but it's for everything else. But as I said, I drive around, I don't see that here.
Absolutely, yes. I don't see it as much now, but when I was younger,
it's interesting that it used to happen.
It used to happen. And that's it. You've mentioned something important there. Drinking water, just as the modeler who we featured in the news said that water is not infinite. So we have to manage it. We have to do all of these things. But this is a good message for us. But again, they have to put their house in order. The NAWEC official we interviewed said that over the years they had been putting structures in place so that the response time would be quicker and the like. So it would be interesting to know what was the response time and what is it now.
Thank you for that, Mr. Bush. And our next story takes us, one might say, internationally, because it was the International Day of the Soninke language, the Sarahule. And yes, it's now recognized as one of the few languages to get its own International Day by UNESCO. And here's a snippet of some of what happened here in the Gambia.
It was a colorful, memorable and enriching celebration marked by cultural exchanges, discoveries and a true engagement in Soninke linguistic and cultural heritages. The day seeks to inform and raise awareness among the public of the need to promote national languages and thus safeguard them as intangible cultural heritage. Hajanjai Conte, Sarata Sise and Yusuf Tunkara all expressed joy at taking part in this celebration.
I'm very happy being part of the organizing committee. We come together to showcase our culture and of course embrace our values, and then of course join the Sarahules around the world, around the globe, to make sure that this day is memorable. And then it's one of those days that will remain one of his culture.
I mean, it's a very important event considering the fact that I am a Sarahule, which were known to be Soninkes. I mean, the event actually is to come together as individuals that share the same ethnicity and ethnic group to talk about some of the things, our cultural backgrounds, the history, where we've come from and how far we have come as an ethnic group.
And it really was a colorful event at Westfield Youth Monument, but also in Paris in France. His Excellency the President was meant to be but of course he was already in New York getting ready to appear at the UN General Assembly. Mr. Mboj, an interesting thing happened in the office when it became known, and people were saying to me, is there an international day of the Mandinka language, the Fula language, the Wolof? Because they were saying that there are many more speakers of those languages. And Gambia has very much been at the forefront of getting UNESCO to accept this, by the way. Such was the case that His Excellency President was meant to be the guest of honor. But it's a, you know, thumbs up really to Soninke that theirs has been recognized.
That's
and a language spoken in so many countries across West Africa.
That's it. And not many languages in Africa benefit from such recognition from UNESCO.
Hausa, Yoruba,
Swahili? What it is?
Well, in West Africa, Swahili
in West Africa, that's
Hausa
and Yoruba. And stuff like that. So absolutely extraordinary.
And only 2.3 million speakers.
About 2.3
so not huge, really.
But spread all over the place.
Across the length of most of West Africa.
West Africa.
Yes.
Really, they were the rulers of ancient Ghana.
This is it. I mean, the modern Ghana stole the name.
Of course.
But
for many centuries.
For centuries, they were.
They came to the end, wasn't it, around 1240? Something like that.
And that's why kind of they've been given this kind of position. So I was trying to explain exactly that to colleagues as to why it was that way. Because if you took sheer numbers or even the spread, then the Fulas in many more countries, the Mandinkas certainly are. But as I said, colourful event, and they had lots of events throughout the day. It was an 8-hour-long event in Paris, in France, and very well attended. And quite impressive. I wouldn't say I watched all of the 8 hours, but I downloaded the full 8 hours and I watched snippets of it, and it was really, really colourful.
Absolutely, and people who are really very proud of
the
ethnic group, you know, their ethnicity, and that I've known so many, went to school with so many of them, very close friends of mine from Sarahole. So this is it. Yes, we must recognize these things and celebrate them and the differences. That's it.
Sure.
But we should be careful that celebrating difference wouldn't make us see the similarities. You don't want to become insular.
Quite.
Because if we all go around saying how proud I am of my ethnicity, then the broader project of forming a national identity, really. We need to do that to function as a nation. So we celebrate all of these things. Difference, absolutely, there's no denying that. But again, where should the focus be? Let us not forget about the other half. As it were.
I think we'll steal from our Caribbean brothers out of many. One people.
Exactly.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now, story number 4. Many ministers have been summoned to appear before the National Assembly and give account of the performance of their ministries. And one such was the tourism minister. He appeared on the same day as the interior minister. But we haven't got both of them. I chosen tourism because of the importance of tourism in the Gambia. So have a look at this snippet.
Members asked the tourism minister about strategies to attract more tourists. Here is the Minister of Tourism, Abdoulaye Diop's response.
Honorable Speaker, in March 2024, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, through the Tourism Diversification and Resilience Project, engaged the services of Royal Haskoning to conduct comprehensive feasibility study of the Kunta Kinte Island. These studies were aimed at developing preliminary designs that would guide the appropriate intervention measures to protect the island from further erosion and damage.
So viewers might be asking, okay, Royal Haskoning, Kunta Kinte Island, what's that got to do with tourism? But of course, Mr. Mboj, part of the thing is that they're trying to encourage greater, what we call heritage tourism. And the sentence before the clip that people heard there was that many countries were impacted by COVID-19, but some of the countries in our near neighborhood are already up to their pre-COVID-19 levels of tourism, but we are not. And so that really is what they were trying to tease from the minister. I'm not sure they got it.
I was a bit surprised that we are conducting feasibility studies now.
Quite.
Because I sort of got the sort of impression, especially under the last minister, Mr. Hamad Ba, that studies had been done. So now there's a strategy in place and there's a plan,
That's right.
you know, to make it so. For a long time, it was just sun, sea, sand.
Yeah, quite.
In many ways. How can we turn it around to encourage these heritage tourists? That's a massive issue. How much of a game changer, if you like, is this idea of changing Kunta Kinte Island? What difference would it make? What have their studies given them? What do they expect? As it were? It will be interesting to know. What are they going to do to make us more appealing?
Well, this is it. I mean, what are the things I wanted to kind of, and I won't mention any countries, obviously, but, you know, things like literary festivals, like book festivals, film festivals, are being conducted by some of these countries, and they're attracting tens of thousands of visitors. And I don't get the sense that we're doing that. We're still trying to kind of depend on the heritage tourism. Those countries have that as well, but they have that plus the sun, the sand, the sea. They have that as well, and they have other stuff, you know. So let's think broader and
That's
wider.
it. But this is the problem for us, Adi. Imagine if you were to begin doing that. I don't think it will seem authentic. I think in Cape Verde,
I never mentioned any.
That's it. It's a slightly different history.
And also they're kind of obsessed with literature. So what they've done is they've made it just mainly Lusophone books. So authors who write, and particularly authors from the former colonized countries of you know, Portugal that colonized, from Guinea-Bissau, São Tomé, Angola, Mozambique, and so on. Those are the ones, and even from Brazil they've been inviting, and so it has this kind of, it's a connection, and the connection they have is that they were all once either enslaved people or people who were colonized by the Portuguese. So that's the glue that kind of sticks them and holds them together. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. For us, potentially, it was going to be Kunta Kinte island or whatever. Create what kind of industry around Kunta Kinte? It doesn't have to be just the village people going there. So, you know, what we do is really limited by our imagination. It's just the name Kunta Kinte that you need. Then you can apply it in so many different areas.
People who know nothing about Gambia know the name Kunta Kinte.
Know the name Kunta Kinte. But we haven't really leveraged that. I don't think we sort of got the optimal that we could have had from this. So there are not going to be any easy answers for how long before we get our pre-COVID numbers of tourists who come here. What's going on afterwards? There's a lot of talk about the other S in tourism, and the minister then came out sort of fighting ferociously. We don't have that, but we all know there've been many reports that that's really what's going on. So how do we rescue this? We need proper imaginative thinking, really.
I think so. Thank you. I think we definitely do. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now on to story number 5, which will also take us to the midpoint in terms of stories. The Gambia Police Force, they have recently gotten their own new forensic lab. Yes, you didn't mishear. Their new forensic lab, all of their own, not having to go abroad. Have a look, have a listen.
We are proud to report that Gambia Police Force Forensic Lab now have the capacity to collect and analyze forensic DNA samples. This development is groundbreaking because it is the first time in more than 100-year history of Gambia Police Force that we have such capacity. Introduction of these forensic tools will improve conviction rates and speed of resolution of criminal cases through due process.
IGP Toure further reiterates the GPF's commitment to standards of human security and its continued engagement with civil society organizations and development partners to foster trust and confidence between the police and communities. The absence of a forensic lab in the Gambia has forced authorities to rely on foreign labs for critical forensic evidence, a process that has often caused significant delays in criminal investigations and hindered justice.
And if you're watching this in the West, you're not in some sort of time warp. We really are getting our first ever forensic lab. I remember when we were doing a story and we saw somebody handling a gun that was an alleged weapon that was used to shoot and kill. And I said, they're going to mess up all the fingerprints. And everybody started laughing. I said, what's funny? And they said, what fingerprints? So, you know, forensic isn't just DNA stuff. It goes back, you know, almost a century. And that, you know, countries have had forensic labs, but at least we're grateful that finally we have. And I was glad to hear that they actually are training people in the collection of the data and the preservation of that data that we'll be collecting through this forensic lab.
Absolutely, and that's exactly it. You know, all the news items that we featured in the past, where a police officer would go to a crime scene and you see him touching,
brandishing,
and
waving,
contaminating all this sort of evidence, which made some of us wonder whether they actually understand, know about the nature of these things. That you are contaminating evidence in many ways, and in court what's going to happen. But again, if you do not have a lab, maybe those things don't matter. So now we have a lab. Thank God for that. Hopefully, yes, you expect their conduct to change when they're going to investigate and how they're going to behave, what they're going to do or do not do at a crime scene and the like. So you hope that, that'll be that change.
It will, and as I said in the kind of lead up to the story, I was pleased that the question was asked and was answered about the training. Apparently quite a number of officials in the GPF, Gambia Police Force, have been trained in how to collect and how to preserve. It's in a way that, as you use the word contaminate, so that the evidence is not contaminated and can be presented in a court of law, should that be required.
Absolutely, and as the IGP said there, it should make a difference. It will help the conviction rates, for instance, he said that, and speed up
the process.
Cases, the process, and these are all good things. Yes, so we will see that effect, or we should see that effect, if everything is properly applied.
That's a big if, Mr. Burch. Thank you for that. And that takes us to a break, and we'll have a commercial break. Join us after this break, and we'll have 5 more stories, so don't go away. Join us after the break.
Mfelentinga kiu mobile na fali nang miya lonko ay tarela duniyato asuniata bake andu nyi mobile ni fennel nata miya lonko kwa betiata na baluoto bake battery nyi se samanu fo tilisaba andung atajila a mobile nyi radio fanan sotole lampo fanan banyi mobile tole ay memory card slot fanan sotole double sim long ikamune batu ta na kiusel bundato mi sutiyate la bi yenela mobile kenda ma soto miya lonko adaba diaring bake dala si keme wora damma isi la kiw mobile soto no bi ani bonus package la nata miya lonko iba minute keme saba hapo diamulale ani keme saba SMS nyimbe sambala kare saba konto konole andung ita fenjola momo lafta kuma koyo moyela nyinto isa na customer care bunjulola ni 111 Qcell sunyu boss ntolle silo wala toli abulan noma nyindung ani sartolle nata.
In a place where conviction meets compassion, Heritage Christian University College stands tall, shaping futures and societies. Here, creativity isn't just a concept, it's the fuel for social change. But it's not just about entrepreneurship, it's about nurturing a spirit of service and community. We instill in our students the values of leadership and giving back. Our graduates don't just earn degrees, they embody entrepreneurship, philanthropy, ethics, and global competence. Heritage is where innovation thrives amidst a serene environment, offering unparalleled experiences. Come, be part of our journey where creativity and community unite to shape a better tomorrow. Heritage Christian University College, educating compassionate entrepreneurial leaders.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, and here going through the stories with me, I have Momo Mboj, and here doing the signing, I have Lamin D. Sonko. And at this point, I always say, if you're joining us for the first time, or you're just joining us after the first half of the show, then you've missed 5 cracking stories. But guess what? 5 cracking stories still to go, so do not despair. Next up, Gambia has just recently played host to the heads of immigration departments from this West African region. And it's been quite an interesting conference. Have a look, have a listen.
The Gambia Immigration Department, GID in brief, remains deeply committed to ensuring the domestication and enforcement of the ECOWAS free movement protocols, which serves as a foundation for the rights of ECOWAS citizens to move freely, reside, and establish where desired, sans frontières.
And unfortunately, they didn't choose a short and snappy theme for this one. I was trying to memorize it without having to look at my piece of paper. But it says the theme was accelerating the deployment of the ECOWAS National Biometric Identity Card and abolishing the 90-day stay limit and resident permit for community citizens. That was the theme. But Mr. Mboj, what ended up dominating proceedings wasn't the 90-day, it was migration.
Absolutely.
Very much migration. And in case anybody's thinking, why migration? Well, let me just read this statistic. The first 3 months of 2024, 13,115 migrants from West Africa alone reached the Canary Islands after crossing by boats from the West African coast. That's just in 3 months.
Absolutely.
And that was a 502% increase on the previous year. So they had a major problem or statistic to deal with, and that ended up dominating the proceedings, really.
Absolutely, Adi. I mean, whatever we've been doing, the figures really were telling us that how effective, they're asking, but how effective have been, you know, what we're doing, the actions that we've been taking. So the numbers are quite clearly going up. It wasn't that the Prime Minister of Spain just wanted sort of a leisurely travel.
There was a reason why
he came. A reason why he came here and returned here and Senegal and the like. It's quite staggering.
It is.
Because they have no idea really what they can do. And likewise, I mean, the Sub-region, we really have no idea what to do.
This is it.
Really, the numbers. Sort of radical, sort of indictment
because
on what we are doing.
Well, this is it. In fact, my joke around this was that, in fact, if you relax the 90-day stay limit for people to go, you know, from one West Africa country to another, the numbers might even go up because people have kind of seen this sort of sub-region, our coast of Mauritania and the coast of Senegal, as a kind of, you know, departure central for this kind of endeavor of people wanting to go to Europe via the Canary Islands. And so you relax those, you're going to, I suspect you'll get more. I mean,
I think this is the key. Once, as the gentleman there said, we sort of apply the free movement protocols, as it were, of ECOWAS, then you might see perhaps some areas getting more of these migrants than others. So you'll probably see different reactions. It will have different effect on different countries.
That's right.
Then, so they will be very careful.
Well,
imagine if everybody around this our sub-region came to the Gambia because apparently it's easier to get these boats and the like. So ECOWAS must think about these things very, very carefully when it's looking at the EU, looking at its history. Perhaps there are lessons to learn there when you want to form this kind of multilateral organizations. You see what the bureaucrats here, we have this bureaucracy really deciding these things. I can't remember, because this is a big thing, you want to allow free movement. I can't remember going for a referendum to decide on that. So bureaucrats really decided that, bureaucrats in Abuja, should I put it that way. So we should be careful with these things. And the EU, we can learn a lot from the EU, from the EEC, EU, that evolution, and look at it, what's going on today because of nationalism, so reasserting themselves. It is training. So we should be careful with these things. Bureaucrats didn't ask anybody. I cannot
Yeah,
remember
right.
any country really having a referendum with this sort of thing. I think it is significant. Otherwise, sooner or later, it might come back to hurt us.
That's right.
We have seen this African to African kind of animosity, acrimony. We've seen Nigeria, Ghana
like that.
over time, South Africa
South
with
Africa.
others. So we shouldn't think that we are immune, as it were, from these nationalisms. I think the notion of Pan-Africanism is still an ideal. The educated, I think more to the educated. I'm not sure whether the uneducated are
Well, this is
really...
it, particularly if I feel that you're going to come and take a job that I
that
should be
sort
doing.
of thing, yes.
So,
We just hope that they're not taking decisions that sooner or later would come back to harm us. Look at what is threatening the European Union now. It was because of what bureaucrats tried to do that has come back really with this vengeance, as it were, this nationalist vengeance. They should be careful, and we should be learning from history.
Let's hope we do.
Really.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mburch. And that takes us to story number 7, and a very different story. The Higher Education Minister, who's at the moment still deputizing because we don't have a basic education minister, launched a series of textbooks and books for our schools. What's new about that? They're all written by Gambians. Have a look and have a listen to this.
Next year, it will be 60 years. 60 years of independence, but 6 years of a vacuum. That lacuna needed to be fixed before we celebrate 60 years of independence. It must be meaningful, it must be useful. We cannot continue to having senior secondary schools using books that are not produced by our own people. What was the essence of our independence if we cannot write our own story?
Mr. Mburch, what's the essence if we cannot write our own stories? But what's your take on this in the kind of broader, general sense, that these are all books now written by Gambians and using Gambian contexts, even when there are not necessarily novels or literature, but just the examples that are using are Gambian ones?
Yes, and our minister there said there has been a lacuna. But I remember Nana Gray Johnson's Magic Calabash taught in schools. I think the history books of Patience Sonko. Patience was Sonko Wilson, Sonko something. Sonko Wilson.
Sonko Wilson.
Yeah,
Yes,
Patience
yes.
Sonko Wilson's
Yes,
books.
yes.
And I even remember there was a time when there were two plagiarists who plagiarized her work, and there was a massive talk. So in leaps and bounds, people have been doing that. And when we were younger, we read Ibu Diba's Fafa and others. And I wondered today, do we teach, for instance, the poems of Landry Peters? That's very, when it comes to poetry in this country, he has it high up there.
Very much.
So, of course, in our piece, I just wanted to know who are the authors.
Because in fact, my disappointment was that our reporter didn't come out with a whole bunch of examples of all of these books, because I was intrigued. I really wanted to know what was in the books that was so different that makes them. So maybe that's a failing on our part. But I really wanted, and when they came, I said, "Where are the books?" I really wanted to just see examples of, one example of each.
That's it.
Yeah.
So nobody can really argue against this idea of having Gambians writing it. But again, I'll say that one's Gambianness is not really my overriding priority when it comes to these things. I really want your competence first, because this is really very, very serious. If the Gambianness comes in, to my mind, it's a very secondary consideration, to be quite honest with you. I want the right thing. So, but if we can get both, fantastic. But I hope that in our consideration of these things, the Gambianness wasn't the #1 priority. Competence must always be #1 priority. Then if the Gambianness is in, oh, nice bonus.
Then it's a bonus, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think you've hit the nail squarely on the head there. Totally agree with you on that front. Story number 8, China, the People's Republic of China, to be exact, recently commemorated 75 years of the founding of the People's Republic of China, and celebrations weren't just in China. There were celebrations here in the Gambia. Have a look at this.
On October 1st, 1949, at Tiananmen Square in Beijing, Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. The proclamation, which was made after a long and brutal civil war against the Nationalist Party, marked the birth of a new nation under Communist Party rule. Since then, the People's Republic of China, PRC, transformed from a struggling agrarian nation into the world's second-largest economy, a leader in technology and a key global player. The country's transformation is unprecedented in modern times. Through a combination of socialism and economic pragmatism, China has lifted millions out of poverty, building vast infrastructure and advancing technological prowess in areas such as space technology, AI, and green energy. China's positive impact is being felt across Africa, including here in the Gambia.
Yes, and there you heard. At the beginning of that, you heard the talk of the Civil War. And these days, when they teach about the founding of the thing, because I don't work for the People's Republic, they tend to, yes, the Civil War featured the nationalists against the communists, the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek. But there was a time when they were both on the same side, fighting Japanese attempts to dominate their country. But once they fell apart, then it led to the split, which has ended up with leaving us with Taiwan, of course. But what we're commemorating, of course, is the founding of the People's Republic, which was proclaimed on that day by Mao Zedong.
Absolutely, and only to think that in the 1930s there was the Republic of Nanking, was it 36, and then afterwards 38 when they took over Manchuria. And all the rest of it, to imagine. Absolutely, and then somehow Mao came from nowhere. He formed the Communist Party, didn't he, around 1920s, and the like, and it moved on. Then yes, the Civil War, 1946 to 49, wasn't it?
That's right.
Then that was when, well, they won. The Communist Party defeated, really, the Nationalist Party. That was why they went to Taiwan.
That's right.
So I was just thinking the other day, sort of the milestones along the way, the Great Leap Forward,
and the Great Walk.
The Great Walk,
it's meant to be the longest ever walk, 385 days. Mao led his people into the mountains, and then they regrouped, and then came again. So
and the Great Leap Forward. Afterwards, the Cultural Revolution, and the like. But you realize that perhaps the running thread throughout was there was an ideology
that was kind of guiding and driving.
They were guided by ideology in many ways. Maybe the problem we have with some of our leaders, when we contrast that in Africa, sort of some of our leaders, with no vision.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because when I kind of proposed that we take a certain angle for this story, and I said, you hear all the time people in Africa saying, oh, if only we could be like China. And I said in one of the WhatsApp groups, I said, what is the ideology that will guide us? And they said Pan-Africanism. That's so woolly. You know, and it's not being insulting, but, you know, it needs to be something more than that. And if you look at China, look at the ideology, and as you said, you know, Mao Zedong kind of came, he gave them a vision, gave them a thought, you know, the thoughts of Chairman Mao, and, you know, we all had the little red book growing up. There was an ideology that guided them, and that is still guiding them.
Absolutely. And at times it was a bloody ideology, because when you think of the Great Leap Forward, 58 to 62, something like that, when you wanted to accelerate industrialization and agricultural output production and the like, apparently the policies caused a huge famine. 30 million or so died.
That's right.
But this is it. You see around the world, look at the one in the Soviet Union as well. You see around the world these visionaries who want to accelerate development. There's a human cost. It appears that this sort of thing happens around the world. Not universally, not in every example, but it's a feature of what we've seen in history. So this is it, and then there was the Communist Party, granted, but they had great leaders. 1978, the 4 programs.
That's right, yes.
Deng Xiaoping, absolutely. Experimenting with, what do you call it, market economics.
Which is kind of, because now you can't really, unless you wanted to be kind of bloody minded about it, you can't really say it's a communist country anymore. You know, it's not. It might be a one-party state, but it's, you know, to all intents, but it's not really a communist country. I mean, because they're very much into kind of market economics and they're very much on the kind of international market in terms of technology and everything else, competing with the rest of the world.
I think that the political institutions, the political structures are sort of self-styled communist.
Yeah, quite.
But the economics is mixed, as it were, because now this is why I tell people who tell me that let's go to their system. I said, hey, look, these people, they had woken up to the idea that market economics is the best way of generating wealth.
Well, this is it, because
that was why they had to add it. They adapted their system to take into account, to institutionalize some of these features of market economics into their system.
Well,
that's how you generate money. And when they did, look at it, by 2010, I think, that's when they became the second largest economy in the world.
And rising, and soon to be the number one.
Something like that. So there's a lot that we can take from them.
Sure.
I'm not sure about the politics.
Quite.
You know what I mean? Because I really cannot tell whether the person I'm going to have could be something like a Kagame. The person I have could be a Yahya Jammeh.
Well, this is it.
So that's why I'm really scared of...
And I've said, when this has been brought up, I said their politics grew up out of their society and their struggle.
Absolutely.
There was something that led to where they are now. We've not gone through that.
That's
so we can't just graft on this and say, oh, they did. No, it's so different that, you know, the journey and the history, that you can't just kind of stitch it onto ours. It just would not work.
Absolutely. And Sankara's point that a soldier, really, without an ideology, is a criminal with a gun. So this is really what the fear is for me, really. I know that if I want economic development, what did the Asian tigers do? Most of these people who did very well economically, there was hardly any democracy. Let's be careful. The kind of development we want, under democratic conditions, going to be extremely slow. It's going to be piecemeal. The goodies of democracy are extremely slow. You are never going to have that radical development that you got. It's impossible. We haven't seen it anywhere.
Not at all. Thank you for that, Mr. Budge. Thank you. And that takes us on to number 9 story, our penultimate story. And we come back here. Crab Island Tivet Foundation. They recently signed a deal with China's Jiangsu Maritime Institute, an MOU. Have a look, have a listen, and find out more.
The MOU is about a partnership between the two institutions, Crab Island Tivet Foundation and Jiangsu Maritime College, Maritime Institute, called JMI. And it entails collaboration in technical and education training that benefits the two institutions, that benefits young people in the two countries. And it also entails teacher exchange, whereby Jiangsu would send its trainers to Crab Island to train our trainers or to train our students, our trainees, and Crab Island also doing that likewise.
I have to smile at that last bit, that they will be sending their trainers to come and train our trainers. And we will be doing likewise in the... What are we going to teach them, Mr. Absolutely. Let's be realistic about this. This is a heavily unbalanced equation, but one that we're grateful for.
I think he was talking there about the longer term goal.
Right. Indeed. Let's
on it. But absolutely, this is the key. Our president of the UN was talking about technology transfer.
That's right.
That's really.
And this is it being made flesh, being made real.
Big time. So it's a very fantastic idea. We train our people, particularly when you talk about maritime. Look at us, we're surrounded by water.
Well, this is it, and that's why it matters. And Jiangsu, in case anybody wants to look it up, is JIANGSU Maritime Institute. Go and look them up. I guarantee you'll be impressed. It's a world leader. Absolutely. And so this is a great deal for us that we're actually signing an MOU with such an institute.
This is what institutes should be doing, really. I remember when I was at Quantum Institute of Technology, we had a certain MOU with the university in Canada, St. Mary's University in Canada. And they sent lecturers over and then teaching our students
here. But did you send any lecturers over there? as we heard Usman Silla say.
Absolutely. Maybe if we had a longer relationship, perhaps. would have been able
Possibly.
to do so.
Sure.
So this is it. You need these collaborative efforts, as
And-
it were,
and I
to
have to-
raise the standards.
This
Isn't
is
it?
it.
You want to raise the standards.
And I have to say, you know, I'll hold my hand up here and I'll confess that there's a reason why I wanted this story, and it's for that very reason. I'd like to see many more collaborations of this sort across every sector that you could think of, whether it be with China or America or whoever has the expertise that can help us lift up our trainers and our conditions of you know, excellence, really. And really that's why I wanted us to kind of just feature this and take, and as I said, go and check out Jiangsu and you'll be impressed.
Absolutely. You get a more worldly, if you like, experience, isn't it? So that's really the key. I suppose that this is where perhaps government could be helpful and be more facilitative, bringing institutions, helping in some way.
Because
you
you're
know,
likely to
institutions
get
form
more
relationships.
This is it.
Absolutely.
Yes. You're likely to get more buy-in if they say that, oh, this is something that government supports, that government backs. And those are the deals that government should be going out and making.
In many ways. So there are, in some ways, that government can be facilitative, bringing about certain relationships for private sector or whoever to benefit, as it were. It's not for government to do it, but to create, we often say it all the time, the enabling environment.
Exactly.
So, absolutely, so fantastic idea.
A good one. So we hope everyone else is listening in every sector and see where you can hook up. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that takes us to our final story, and close to home, not quite home, but close to home. Guinea-Bissau, 50 years of independence. And those have been quite interesting years of independence. Have a look, have a listen.
A year after its self-proclaimed independence, Portugal said it had granted the country independence. However, for most Bissau Guineans, the September 1974 date is the one they recognized. Once regarded as a possible example for African growth, the country is today among the poorest in the world. The crucial cashew nut crop provides a modest living for the majority of Guinea-Bissau farmers, and it is the main source of foreign exchange. But today, the country has a vast foreign debt and an economy that is heavily reliant on international help.
Heavily reliant on international help. We didn't even get onto the drugs hub that it was labeled a narco state. It was called at one time because it was such a transit point for drugs, Mr. Mboj. Of course, Amilcar Cabral led the struggle and unfortunately died in the very year. So 1974 is when they self-declared, and I'm glad that's the one they're celebrating because rather ridiculously in 75, Portugal then said, okay, we'll give you your independence. And like, you know, we don't want to know. We've already declared our independence. But those have been quite turbulent years since then, haven't they?
The only example in Africa, Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, the only example where the natives beat the colonialists at the battlefield.
This is it.
The only example of it.
In Africa.
So, what if Cabral wasn't killed? You see, all these what ifs, these counterfactuals.
What if Sankara wasn't killed?
What if?
We have all these what ifs, don't we? Yes.
He knew what the problem was, and now we are seeing it. Things are sort of playing out. He knew that he tried to forge a sense of identity in the bush.
That's right.
Correct. Absolutely. Correct. Knowing very well that for the newly independent states, you need an independent mind.
Well, this is it.
This is the discongruity.
And people can go online. They can go online. There's a World in Action, which is a British TV program, and they went to Bissau when the fighting was on. And the question they asked him, and the answer he gave was quite a kind of educational one. They said, "How is it that in the areas that you have captured from the Portuguese, you've managed to set up more schools than the Portuguese who've been here for 300 years?" And he talked about the importance of education. He said, this is the only thing that will lift us out of poverty, is the knowledge to do things for ourselves, to stand up on our own feet. And when you go to Cape Verde, you hear that a lot. In fact, the National Museum in Cape Verde, they've got a massive exhibition on right now, and all along the walls, the only thing you see are pictures of Cabral. The whole, and because they hold him so dear. And the importance of education.
And healthcare. He created all of that.
Yeah.
And he created sort of a kind of bush economy.
Yeah, quite.
He was an inventive, creative, highly educated person with a vision. This is really what we
keep talking
need.
about
You
this
need
vision.
to have that vision thing, because that will direct everything else that you do in many ways. So this is it. But afterwards, remember when they started their movement, the PAIGC, when it started, the number of people that were educated, Portugal left a terrible, terrible, terrible legacy.
Shocking legacy.
He didn't have much time really to change much. So by the time they got independence, school, how many people had gone to school?
This is it.
What were the resources? What were the family assets for us to be independent, as it were? What family assets do we rely on? So all of these problems is difficult. It's really played out in the end. Extremely difficult to run, isn't it? So you've seen all these changes. How many presidents really saw through their term?
This is it. Not many.
Not many.
I think
so,
we have
absolutely. And Mbalo, now it's Mbalo's turn. What is it he can do? Recently, he announced that he wasn't going to go for the second term.
And then he might change his mind.
Afterwards, I'm like, oh, you're doing a Michael Jackson. You're moonwalking. You're backsliding.
He's doing a Jawara. Exactly.
Doing a Jawara. That 1992 thing. So this is the issue. This is the problem. So, of course, happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
But,
we wish them well.
What a difficult journey it has been.
It really has been.
It's been for us as well, in some ways.
True enough. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And just say thank you to you, and thank you to Lamindi Sonko, who's been signing for us throughout the program. And of course to you, the viewer, thank you for staying with us. And join us again, same time next week. Until then, goodbye.